All right, welcome back, everybody, to the ATB NFL Live Show. This week, we are doing or continuing our preview of each division in the NFL. This week, the AFC North. I'm sure you guys know I'm excited. I don't know if
I
you
couldn't
can
tell by your hat,
tell,
shirt, or
possibly.
jersey.
Like, I don't know if Najee here. I don't know if you could tell that this is my division that I'm going to be excited about. We will get to you guys with the AFC East. Probably we'll do the NFC East this next show that we do, so we can get to the AFC East then as well.
No. We need to save those two for last.
You want to
Those are
save?
we have to save the
We can
East
save
for
it.
last.
We can save it. So
The
we
East
can,
for
we can,
last.
Yeah, let's hit the
Perfect.
West next,
Yeah, we can
and
do the
then
West.
save the East for
Gotcha.
last.
Gotcha. We can do that then. Okay, so
We got to save the best for last.
Oh. Okay. I mean,
I think we might be saving the best for today.
We'll see, but yeah, we'll talk.
Oh no,
about
I was
that.
just talking about Tony and I's team.
Well,
Yes.
fair enough. Fair enough. No, but yeah, this week we are going to be doing the AFC North. Lots to talk about that division, as Tony kind of alluded to. Real strong, could be very bloodbath-y type of division this year. Again, as kind of always is for the most part, especially the last few years. But we will get into that first. We do have to talk about yet another batch of gambling suspensions the NFL handed down. Finally, we heard news about Colts players specifically. Then we found out it was Isaiah Rodgers, and then we kind of got the full details here recently. So it ended up being, unless I'm mistaken, I missed something, 4 players total who were suspended, 3 of which were suspended indefinitely through the 2023 season. Isaiah Rodgers, of course, as I previously mentioned, the Colts. Rashad Berry as well, who I'm not super familiar with, but he is a member of the Colts as well. And free agent Demetrius Taylor, again, all suspended indefinitely. And then a potential or was going to be the starting right tackle for the Tennessee Titans this year, Nicholas Petit-Frere, also suspended, but only for 6 regular season games. I think pretty much the same suspension that Jameson Williams was handed as well, as far as I could tell, for betting on a non-NFL sport just at a club facility. So the other 3 did bet on their teams, or in the case of Demetrius Taylor, bet on the NFL, as far as I could tell. And that's why those suspensions are indefinite. So again, we've seen this before with the Lions, especially. We kind of know what the deal is here. We've talked about before. I have my reservations with the whole thing, but this is pretty clear, especially with Isaiah Rodgers. He actually bet on his team to win. I will say
he bet on his team and then some.
And then also won. Ironically,
we're talking about the league's first permanent suspension, I think.
Yeah, probably from what we've seen. Yeah.
Oh wow. Pete Rose,
I guess for real. So, because I said that, I guess I'll provide the additional context on exactly what Isaiah Rodgers did, because that's important. So we've seen examples of players betting on their own team to win, a la Calvin Ridley, others. And that's a full year suspension. We understand what that means now. Yeah. No questions about that. We've seen players be at league facilities and bet on sports that aren't theirs, and we've seen that that's a 6-game suspension. Yes. Might even get arbitrated down, if I had to guess.
Right.
What we have not seen yet, and what we have seen now with Isaiah Rodgers, is the true example of why the guardrails are so strict, is that players can take the inside knowledge that they have and make themselves a lot of money if they do things very unethically. So Isaiah Rodgers placed a lot of bets throughout last season. A lot of them, they all ranged from $25 to $50, all on the Colts to win. Mm-hmm. Nothing really wrong with that in like a affecting the game kind of sense. It is obviously bad. It is worthy of a full year suspension.
Right, yeah.
But when you are only betting in $25 to $50 amounts, and then you lay down $1,000 on a prop bet on a running back on your own team, so he has inside knowledge. Now, we don't even know what the actual bet was. Maybe it was, oh, I know that Jonathan Taylor's super banged up, I'll bet the under on him. Or, oh, I know he's not going to play at all, and that's not known yet, I'm going to bet the over on Zach Moss. Something along those lines. We know that he won the bet, but that is full on like
insider trading type of situation.
Essentially, yes, it's insider trading, right? He knew exactly what was going to happen and bet $1,000. So, 20 times what he usually bets, and he bet that on his own teammate. So it's probably gonna. I think he's gonna get the first ever permanent suspension from the league, because this is exactly what the league is trying to curb with all these otherwise extremely strict. Some people see them as unreasonable. The reason those rules exist is because it doesn't take that long to get to this step. Right. And you got to have those strict guardrails. So I do think we'll see him out of the league forever, which sucks because he was really coming into his own. He was going to be in a contract year coming off of his best season.
Start the year especially.
he risked millions and millions and millions of dollars to win $1,000 bet, and if you are any good at betting, you bake that into the risk when you're doing it. So
Yes.
not only is he an idiot who threw away his career, he's also a bad gambler.
Yeah, it's weird. It's because again, like I understand like some people have issues with gambling, right? And I wonder when it comes to Isaiah Rodgers, does he just have a gambling issue? Because to take a risk like this for what can't be, I mean, obviously too significant amount of money, even if you bet $1,000 on a under or over bet or whatever, like you're not making like millions or anything stupid off that. Like that's you have to do crazy parlays and stuff like that. Like you're not going to replace income. You're not going to increase your income level as an NFL player betting like that. So it's just the situation is really weird with him, especially. And I think you are right though, Tony. I'd be very surprised if he does return, just because again, when you factor in that he made a specific bet like that on something that he would have some amount of knowledge into, you would assume it's going to be a tough sell for him to come in and back to the league and say, hey, like I think his only shot is that maybe in a year or two he can show proof that like, hey, I've not continued to gamble at all, even in my like private life. I understand what like there would have to be very much like a proof of basically him getting away from that lifestyle of gambling to even have a shot to get back in. So, but any other thoughts you have for Zach on this or?
No, the other thing I did want to add, I mean, y'all know my stance on the betting. It's one thing when it is on betting on football and betting on your own team. Yes, I fully understand that there is some gray area there to where like, oh yeah, they do have knowledge. I start to be like, they were betting on basketball. Like, I'm sorry, they're in a state where, and that's where I agree with what's the Titans offensive lineman. Where he's like, yeah, it's legal by Tennessee law. Like I didn't break anything. It wasn't on football. But again, rules are rules, whether they're correct or not, or hypocritical or not. My biggest issue is that the NFL has just gone full into, yes, we want our fans to be using this. And and even more so as far as like being in a state that has a lot of sports betting, it's everywhere. Like it's not even just like I'm talking about like we were watching football. Like I drive down the street and there's billboards for FanDuel and DraftKings, and that's where I go to the point where it's like it's getting a bit too reliant on using that for revenue. As I think that's becoming the bigger issue as far as like we've moved away from a lot of tax money coming from like cigarettes and alcohol, and it's gone towards betting and weed right now. It's kind of weird because those were like really whatever, but that's getting way off point. But it's just, I think it's getting harder for a lot of people to stay away from betting. Like it's always there and it's always around. So it'd be interesting. The only thing I think we should have also mentioned, another suspension, is they announced Cam Robinson's 4 games, the actual term for his PEDs. That was, I figured that was also good to link in here as well.
That sounds about right. Yeah. I didn't see that.
Yeah. That's actually like lighter than I think probably even the Jaguars expected, given they were pretty desperate to draft a tackle in the first round. I assume partially due to that.
Admittedly, I do think that their plan is to move on from Robinson in the near future
as it
anyway.
Should be.
So like it probably didn't really truly impact their decision too much. Like I do think Anton Harrison is worthy of that selection. So I'm not super worried about it. But we'll see how that goes for them. It is good to know for them though that they will have starting tackle back though.
There was a lot of news for that division. There's a lot of news for that division that came out after we did that division.
I mean, most of it doesn't, I don't think, impact things super much, too much anyway. So not super worried about it, but
it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I do think the Isaiah Rodgers thing cuts down the ceiling for the Colts by a little bit, but
yeah, because they're going to be starting multiple rookie corners, and that's just a tough ask. It really is. Yeah. So, but speaking of division breakdowns, let's get into first team for the AFC North, and we're going to start with the team that finished last in the division, as they tend to usually do. Things might be a little bit different this year. We'll talk about that. Cleveland Browns. So right off the bat, I think the thing that we need to say with this team is they're the most talented they've been as a roster since they've returned to the NFL, right? I don't think there's really any argument about that. This is the most talented team they've been able to put together in that time period. But it kind of all comes down to the biggest and riskiest decision that they have made as a franchise, maybe ever in general, right? what does Deshaun Watson look like in year 2 with this team? Because if he doesn't look like at least 90% or so of the quarterback that they probably thought they were getting based on last time he played football before that, it might not matter as much the talent around this team as it should. And there's still some things that, of course, every team has questions. There's still some things with this team that we have to question as well. So let's get into it. I do want to start with some strengths for this team. Obviously, offensive line has been a strength of this team for quite some time. Got to put that up there. Still have a lot of the same guys. They're going to be still very strong in that regard. Injuries obviously have kind of banged them up occasionally the last few years, but just when they're healthy, especially, one of the better starting fives in the league. Edge rush with Myles Garrett, and they're bringing in Zadarius Smith. That could be a deadly duo for sure. Smith brings a lot of different things what Clowney brought to them the past couple of years. Running back, Nick Chubb, probably, I mean, there's debate about this, but like, especially with Henry getting a little bit older, like maybe the best pure runner in the sport at this point, just if you're asking him to run the ball. He's definitely up there. I
personally don't even find that debatable. I
think
it's
exactly.
been that way for a
like,
couple of years now.
Like if we're just talking about pure carry the football, he doesn't really get better than him at this point in the NFL. And then secondary, I really like the way they built up their secondary. I really like Martin Emerson, him being kind of this true starting corner now and everything like that. Weaknesses, I'll get into that too as well. We can talk about some of the other things here. Quarterback is still a question mark. Of course, we have to see what he looks like in year 2. But I still have a lot of reservations there. Even though they did sign, let me pull it up here, actually, their depth chart, just to make sure. Dalvin Tomlinson to kind of beef up their interior. Outside of him, it's still kind of questionable for sure. They have Siaki Ika they drafted to be kind of their nose tackle. They don't really have a true nose tackle type. Not a fan of him either, Tony. Don't really think he's going to make much of an impact really ever, but especially year 1. So if Tomlinson goes down or just doesn't play well, that interior could still be pretty rough. And then just kind of depth at certain spots on the roster is still kind of questionable to me, but that's really the main things I would say. So any objections on strengths, weaknesses, anything you guys want to add to that?
I personally think tight end is a strength because I love David Njoku.
Well, yeah, I mean Njoku, he's a really good player,
and I'm really hoping that if we see the step forward from Deshaun Watson of not being just total ass on the field this year, that Njoku will finally get us the chance that he deserves to show off what because he is an incredibly gifted and athletic tight end.
All of his efficiency stats are just like top of the charge. So I think, you're right. If he starts to get good usage,
right.
And going out.
Yeah, I think the question is just volume with him. You wonder how much volume he'll have, but
And then you nailed the first strength off rip. I started looking at these rosters and depth charts, and holy cow, the offensive line that the Browns have managed to put together is incredible. You've got top-notch talent across the entire way. It's great.
And depth too, which is
really cool. Pretty solid.
And depth, well.
Like I personally, I've said it a million times on this show. Like I don't like DeJuan Jones, but when he's your 4th best tackle, and that's all he has to be, you got depth.
If he works out too, like he could be a long-term Conklin replacement if he can get his weight and himself figured out. Because there is obviously a lot of issues there. That's why he fell, but the talent is there. It's just about whether he can bring it out with some NFL coaching. But
I do think the wide receiver room is a little underrated.
I hesitated to put it as a strength just because I do question how much better can Donovan Peoples-Jones be than he already has been. What are they going to get from Elijah Moore year 1 with them? I do like him a lot, but it is a question mark until you see him really do it consistently.
I do like
Cooper, obviously, is there.
I do like the Cedric Tillman pick.
Yes, the draft
that was great.
Very much. Yes, very much.
They even like it. The David Bell was picked last year. He didn't really get a big chance to show off what he can do. But if he's your 4th or 5th guy, like you're feeling good. They brought in Marquise Goodwin. Like that's something I put down.
They still have Jakeem Grant.
The entire offensive skill group is I put down. So it's robust. Like I think they have a ton of players, and they're checking boxes in all of those. They're diverse, which I really like. Everybody has a different like major.
The diversity of skill sets is really
Amari Cooper. He's your true number 1 route runner guy. Elijah Moore, like he's your crafty slot. DPJ, he's your Gabe Davis, whatever that archetype of like just go run a vertical route stem and So and then the way the tight ends and the running backs come into it. it's all congruent. Like it fits the scheme, and they all fill the roles necessary. So I think it's a very well designed skill group. It's not like a top end skill group, but it's very well put together.
Yeah, the diversity of skill sets is really important because if you can't get truly elite players, the best thing you can do is diversify the things that you can do offensively with the guys you have. That's part of the reason why we haven't gotten to them yet. But when we get to the Patriots, I think that, and not even the Patriots, but also when we talk about the Raiders, especially because they brought in a Patriots receiver, they have top end guys like Devontae Adams, but they have two slots as their their second, third receiver. Like diversifying your skill set is really important because if you have too many guys do the same thing, unless they all do it at a super high level, it's not going to really create a cohesive offense. So I think the Browns definitely done a good job of bringing in guys that can do different things offensively for them for sure.
Yeah.
But any weaknesses you guys want to touch on other than what I talked about? Obviously, quarterback is a question mark. We'll talk more about him. But interior defensive line can be definitely an issue if Tomlinson doesn't either play well or gets hurt. And like I said, the depth across the roster outside of a few positions is
I think the
iffy.
linebacker's a little weak.
Yeah, I mean, if JOK doesn't stay healthy, that group gets bad pretty fast. Yeah. Honestly, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I am a little bit worried about JOK just his size profile fitting in a Jim Schwartz defense. It's a little... I didn't bring this up during strengths, and I feel like I should. Yeah. They got rid of what was their defensive coordinator's name? Joe Woods, yes. Which I mean, the softest ass defense you could possibly run.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Like it was embarrassing to watch. Yeah. Like if you have bad run D, it gets very demoralizing very quickly. The Browns were such a shining example of that. Yeah. So bringing in Jim Schwartz to play that aggressive front, him and Myles Garrett together, him and Zadarius Smith, and then I mean even Ogo Okoronkwo as your third rusher, he could start solid. And I'd be happy. Yeah. So the defensive line with Jim Schwartz, I think, is really exciting. Some of the other pieces with Jim Schwartz, I'm a bit worried about, like the linebacker group, but the defensive overhaul, I think, is probably the biggest needle mover for this team overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general. And I think that it's at least going to kind of bring up the floor of the rush defense like we talked about, where it's probably just not going to be as bad regardless, even if the interior defensive line group either doesn't play well or if Tomlinson, like I said,
Dalvin Tomlinson's going to have to play 100% of the snaps.
He's probably going to have to, and that's why you worry, like, is he either going to get worn down? Is he going to deal with any injuries? Like, because if Jordan Elliott has to come back out in the field, or if, again, Siaki Ika has to come out in the field, which he probably is anyway, just because I think they drafted him for a reason. I don't think that reason is going to be worked out very well, at least in year one especially. But it's going to be one of those situations where if their interior defensive line collapses and their run defense does collapse around it, it could turn into a similar issue that they experienced last year, especially if the offense isn't firing on all cylinders. So really, it's overall with this team, like the thing we kind of have to come back to again is, what Watson do we get? Do we get a 80% of Deshaun Watson from 2020 or whatever year he played last? Do we get the guy last year for the most part? Do we get 100% of him? Like, I think the days of him being the player that he was prior to coming over to Cleveland and was last year in Texas probably just isn't going to happen. And not even like an injury thing or an age thing or anything. He's still very young. I just think that time away from the league and everything that he's done personally and the things he's still probably struggling with, I imagine, from what we know, like, I just don't know if he's ever going to get back to that full locked in, like all about football, being able to play at a high level situation. So at best, I think they're hoping for 90% of what he was. If they get that, this team is probably going to be very strong in general, but it's asking a lot based on what we saw last year. So,
well, I think based on what we saw last year, but we also have to keep in mind that he hadn't been on a football field for 2 years.
Exactly.
And I don't even think it was like so like this isn't like something where he was like injured. I guarantee you he was still practicing and training, and yes, you're not having the simulation of actual NFL football, but you can still keep yourself in shape. I think he just needed a good season to shake some rust off. And again, you're not going to see a single one of us sitting here and be like, oh yeah, no, Deshaun, like we love Deshaun Watson. Like, no, we are all doing this begrudgingly.
Not going to happen.
And it's still really annoying to sit here and be like, oh, here we are. We're talking about this. I don't, if you get 90% of what Deshaun Watson is in Houston, I think this is a competitive, extreme.
Oh, yeah, this is a Super Bowl contender.
It's very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's all they're hoping for is 90%, I think you could really get 70% or like 60% of what Deshaun Watson was in Houston, because that would still be a good to mediocre quarterback. And you've seen teams do that before. If we're talking about as solid as this roster is, if you're getting a 70-80% of like being a fantastic quarterback, because that's what he was in Houston, was a fantastic quarterback. I'll be Cleveland. I'll take that any day.
And that's more likely what'll happen, is closer to 70-80%. But
yeah,
it's still one of those things where, again, like, he was so hard to watch last year.
Yeah.
There's a lot
the
of
most concerning thing is, I mean, he played 6 games. No rust was shaken off. He did not change over the course of 6 games. So, like, he took a 2-year hiatus. He's in a new offense. He wasn't allowed to practice with them for parts of the thing because of the suspension and everything.
Yeah, he came back, I think, like a week
over the course of 6 games, honestly, like, slightly getting worse game over game. Like, not putting anything on tape that shows you're starting to get back into it. Now, a full normal offseason can probably solve for a lot of that. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying, like, if the rust was the issue, I would have expected by the time we got to Game 6 to see, like, a glimpse of what he used to be, and we didn't see that, which is really concerning.
And, like, his ability,
or exciting if you hate him like we do.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, his ability to see the field just felt like it just never existed last year. Like, there's so many moments where I'm like, how are you putting the ball there? Like, what are you seeing out on the field? And, like, obviously, like, that is part of it. Like, coming back and not being in game speed for a long time, you're gonna have moments like that. But for them to continuously happen, and for you to really not get a whole lot of moments of like, wow, that was a great read. Like, he really had to go through his progressions and find that guy, like that type of stuff. Like, if he's not going to be able to do that to the level he did in Houston, like, it's going to limit what they can do offensively. Like, it's going to have to be very much like how Kyle Shanahan can do anything with any quarterback, like that style of offense that they're running over there in Cleveland. Like, that's going to have to be to the max. Like, they're going to really have to protect him a lot. And it will work probably to a certain degree because they have plenty of guys who can play, but it's going to limit their ceiling offensively. And that's why when you look at the defense, like, if they do collapse in the interior again, or if they can't stop the run or whatever may happen, God forbid Myles Garrett gets hurt, like, like, that's going to put a lot of pressure on them. And it might be a little too much in year one of this new defense. So let's get.
I will say, sorry, just wanted to make one last point on the offense and Watson is So he didn't have last offseason, and importantly, Kevin Stefanski didn't have last offseason to intend for his offense to be run through Deshaun Watson. So the style of offense the Browns have been playing under Stefanski, I think we'll see it pivot more to a pass-focused offense, a more spread-focused offense, to better align with what Deshaun Watson is really good at. So I do think he was asked to play a little bit out of scheme, out of his usual last year, and the play calling will be more congruent to his play style. But
you assume,
again, like, I would have liked to have seen some amount of progress from him over last year to come into this really confident about him.
Well, that's where I like one thing for the future. If this Deshaun Watson thing doesn't work out, I think they could have a seamless transition into DTR.
I like Robinson a lot.
I
do love DTR. I would love to see him in this offense.
It'd be fun.
It would be fun because we've seen Josh Dobbs play. We've seen Kellen Mond play. You haven't seen DTR play. If Deshaun Watson doesn't work out, they're not going to be able to bite that bullet and get rid of that because they've screwed themselves on that contract.
Yeah, it's got to work out, or
you could plug him in, and you still have the mobile, like you can still get a lot of the athletic play and hope that, hey, maybe we hit on a later round quarterback that we weren't expecting.
Yeah, at least give him baseline play. Yeah.
When we get into our ceiling floor stuff, and next, like, Jacoby Brissett had this team in a really nice spot. Like, this team was competitive and good with him. So I do think that, like, if Deshaun Watson bottoms out really, really quickly and they switch to a DTR to anybody, like, I think the floor gets higher if they switch to one of those quarterbacks. The ceiling shrinks, but I do think that there's a lot of value and credit to that, where, like, you could plug another quarterback into this, and they have a lot of stuff that can work.
Yeah, They
have a very interesting schedule this year too. Just interesting times, and they're on weird TV channels for some. They have a Prime Video game and they have an ABC game.
There's gonna be a lot of that this year. It's gonna be real weird. Yeah.
The Bills Chargers Week 16 exclusive on Peacock, baby.
Such a weird thing.
Hey, take an example from the USFL and XFL. Let's go.
Exactly. That's where we're at with it. But let's get into predictions here. I'll kick things off. So I think that their floor is pretty similar to what happened last year. Honestly, like a 7-10-ish situation. That's if Deshaun's bad, if the interior defensive line collapses, all this stuff. If a lot of things that plagued them last year still show up, and then somehow even stronger AFC, realistically, it could end up being a very similar year to last year, which again, that floor is still pretty high for a lot of teams, especially teams that are coming off of the fourth place finish in the division. But I think this team could win 11-ish games if Watson plays really well, even maybe a little bit more than that if the division kind of doesn't destroy each other the way that we probably think it will. I think that they could be a solidly in the mix playoff team, like a true, like not 1 or 2 seed necessarily maybe, but even so possible with the way the AFC is. 11 wins might get you a 2 seed with the way this not just this division, but the conference will be. But I think that the potential, like I said, the ceiling, if Watson plays up to his potential, is really high. But I think the floor, like you said, Tony, like kind of probably similar to last year because of especially if he plays all the games and just isn't good. It could end up being a very similar year for Browns fans. Let's go to Tony here for the next one.
Yeah, so I'm going to provide 2 different sets of predictions because I think it's a very funny way to look at this team.
Yes, yeah.
So I'll lead with my if Jacoby Brissett were still the starter in Cleveland projection. Okay. If that were the case, I would set a 10-win ceiling and an 8-win floor. I think that they would very comfortably be a good team. Right. With Deshaun Watson at quarterback, 12-win ceiling. Obviously the ceiling is higher. I think that this can be a really good team. The defense can sneak into the top half, maybe even top 10. The offense can be a top half of the league unit. 12 wins feels right. I think with Deshaun Watson at the helm, they have a 5-win floor.
He really stinks it up, huh?
I think what I saw out of him, I was shocked. I've never seen him play that bad of football in like anywhere. I didn't see any progress out of him, which I've said a couple times that is very concerning for me. So I do think that this floor with Deshaun Watson at quarterback is a lot lower than with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Obviously, the ceiling shrinks, and we're all playing for the ceiling in the NFL. So as it is still right to have the better quarterback, all else ignored. But the floor does get lower. Like it can bottom out really hard with Watson at quarterback, where I think it wouldn't really happen with Brissett.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah. So I think this is the first one that we've gone through the first division where I'm like, man, I really can't pick any of these divisional games because I really don't know what's going to happen. There's been some divisions where I'm like, oh yeah, like maybe, but like I'd like the NFC South. I was splitting them practically and like stuff like this just to get so like here I'm like, okay, I haven't looked at it. Like I can't determine a divisional game total, but I'm looking at a firm 7 wins that I think that they could definitely get. It's gonna be interesting because I think a lot of people have downplayed the Browns because of the Deshaun Watson stuff.
Yeah,
and this is a really good team.
Yeah, their potential
and like I feel bad for all the other 52 guys on the roster because like I would like to see them succeed, but unfortunately the one that I don't like the most is at the front of getting all of the information, all of the headlines, and it's just like but no, I could see this team being second place possibly if like you said, if he plays to potential, I think they could win the AFC North.
I don't think there's a single team in this division that couldn't win it under certain circumstances.
Fully agree.
Yes and no. Unfortunately for you, Shayne, the next one we're going to go through, I think that it's a little bit hard. I think it's hardest for the Pittsburgh to win, but I just because I see the most holes on their roster as opposed to anybody else. I'm 9-10 win season I think is very likely, and like we've said, this is going to be a weird AFC where it's extremely competitive, and whoever's in the like the NFC champion is just going to be lucky the fact that they didn't have to play all the AFC. They're just going to be happy to be there. Hey guys, we made it.
Honestly, it could be that way. So
it's going to be a bloodbath. Like the more that we
is.
keep talking about this, it's like, man, I don't see how like number one in the AFC is any more than like 12,
11
maybe
12
13
wins.
games.
Yeah, I could see that still 13, but yeah, I would say, like I said, the Browns, they're the strongest they've been roster wise, like I said, since they've been back, and I think that it's just whether they put it all together this year, or if it takes another year, or if Watson is ever going to be able to do it. Like that's kind of the questions, but they're certainly set up to have the potential as early as this year to really make it happen for them. So. Moving on to my Steelers, of course, to finish third in the division last year, 9-8. Who would have guessed that they would be able to do that despite starting 2-6?
Winning record.
Yeah, despite starting 2-6, we kind of
500 or better.
I mean, even I was like, maybe not this year. And then, of course, good old Mike Tomlin shows up. He's like, listen, I ain't losing 9 games. It ain't happening. So, of course, they kind of finish out the year very strong, kind of in a weird way. Like they didn't really do many things differently. I think they just played a combination of worse teams, and also Kenny Pickett started to get a little bit hot down the stretch in terms of just not turning the ball over and making good decisions. But let's talk about strengths for this team. Safety with Minka Fitzpatrick, and I think DeMonte Kesey is also a really good player. Played well for them when he came back. I think safety will be very strong. Interior offensive line, I'm really a big fan of what they've done. They're bringing James Daniels. Mason Cole played as at least a league average center last year, which is much better than we got from Kendrick Green the year before. And you bring in Isaac Seumalo. I really love that pickup. One of my favorite pickups of the offseason for this team especially. And edge group, of course, we know when those two are healthy, when Highsmith and Water out there, it's just hard to deal with that. Like it just is. We saw even though Watt didn't have a huge statistical season, even after he got back last year, with the difference in sack production and pass rush was just gigantic. We're 1-10 when he's missed games since he's been here, by the way, if that tells you anything. So his
Pretty
health is really, yeah. His health is, if he can stay healthy, that edge group will be great. And then interior defensive line with Cameron Hayward, bring back Larry Ogunjobi, draft Keanu Benson, personal favorite of mine. That group I think is going to be very strong in general, especially at the top, but in general, I think that's going to be pretty, important for them. Weaknesses before I let you guys kind of chime in here. Matt Canada is the weakness of this team for me. Like the one, like there's other ones, obviously. Every team has weaknesses, but if he just didn't exist, then we'd probably be in a better spot. Corner still definitely much a question mark. You bring in Patrick Peterson, but what do you get out of him at his age? You have Joey Porter Jr., huge get. Love that we still managed to get him at pick 32. Kind of hilarious to me that we did that. But he's a rookie corner. How much is he going to make an impact? Levi Wallace is still there, which is, whatever. Just the corner group in general has very much potential for up and down. And offensive tackle still, even if Roderick Jones starts, so he is a rookie tackle, and you have Chukwu Okorafor on the other side, essentially in that case. Didn't have a great year last year. Kind of think he's hit his ceiling. He's just like a league average right tackle, which is fine. But again, tackle might be an issue for us. Other things for sure to talk about, but let's get to what you guys have to say about that.
Who's going?
Zach, you want to kick it off? I feel like you're going to be disagreeing harder than I.
Yes, he's got
okay. So like one of my biggest concern for the Steelers,
lay it on me, Zach.
Is I don't know who your number one receiver is, because Deontay Johnson is not number one receiver.
If it's not Deontay,
yes, he is.
As a longtime Deontay Johnson fantasy owner, he lives and dies by
ignore fantasy. The man leads the league in targets every year. He is successful on those targets. He doesn't score touchdowns. Boo-hoo. He's a damn good football player.
Too much.
He hasn't done that shit since his rookie year.
See, what I love about this, guys, is Zach is being Steelers fans, right now. So Zach is being Steelers fans about is Deontay, and then Tony is being the looking at things objectively of how he wins, what he does for the team. And then there's me who's he was super inefficient last year, and a lot of that was because of the offense. But I think that because Matt Cannon is still here, I question whether Deontay will be able to get back to his production level simply because of who the offense coordinator is and the fact that we are moving towards some other players target-wise, I think. But he's a very good player. I think he is a good player. Technically, receiver one. I think he's still going to be leading this team in targets, although I'm hoping the distribution is a little bit differently.
When I watch him play,
there's few guys out there who I can rely on to be open. Like
when we were having that
he's
conversation
open.
last week, I look at him as a firm, like, yo, I have him, I want him to be my wide receiver 2. Like, he is helping my
sure,
wide
that'd be great
receiver
if he
1.
could be receiver too, but
Now,
I mean,
I will say, if you can get Allen Robinson of old, which that's one thing that I kind of am just waiting to hear, like, see somebody, like, I'm tired of hearing people talk about Allen Robinson like it was. I need to see him do something first, and then we'll be like, okay, cool, that's fine. He is the player that he was. But it's just been so many stops where it's like, oh yeah, he has a new surrounding. It's gonna be great this time. And then like we're just like, oh wait, but nothing happened.
yeah, I mean, if it makes you feel better, I'm expecting Allen Robinson to catch like 30 balls this year for 280 yards and probably like 2 touchdowns. Like, I'm not really factoring him in super heavily into what this team does offensively. I think that he's at least a guy that can come in and be like that big body slot receiver type for them this year, and let George Pickens obviously stay inside, let Deontay stay
Yeah.
outside, where I think he's at his best. Calvin Austin, I'm
He'll be
hoping
like 5th in targets.
you hope. Yeah.
Well,
hope
yeah,
so.
because one of the strengths that you didn't bring up that I was going to bring up, Pat is fantastic.
Yeah,
Top 5 tight end in the NFL
Yes,
right there.
absolutely. And he deserves his flowers. What, this is year 3?
Year 3. Yep.
Yeah, and he got it as a rookie. He was. Do you know how hard it is to transition from college to the NFL as a tight end for a rookie season, to have like that?
And he's not like strictly a pass catching tight end either. Like, because the ones who hit the ground running are the ones who don't have to worry about learning how to block in the NFL. No, he does both, and he's just damn good at both of them.
Yes, yes. And y'all got Darnell Washington behind him.
Yeah, so that's the thing about this, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into, is the strength of this team. I talked about the strengths there. What it really is going to be is, what does this run game look like with the pieces they've put around it? Because everything they've done, between bringing in guys like Isaac Seumalo, drafting Broderick Jones, who probably is going to be a little bit rough in pass protection year 1 if he does play, just because he's a rookie tackle, but showed a ton of ability as a run blocker at Georgia. You bring in a guy like Darnell Washington to be the tight end 2 ostensibly. Everything they've done leads me to believe that they want to run the ball 50 times a game. Now, are they going to do that? Probably not. Still, obviously, you're in the modern NFL, they're going to have to throw the ball more than they probably did at times last year, especially down the stretch, if they want to win games. But this team wants to run the football. And if they can do it on the level that they expect to, it's going to be very hard to beat this team when that's working, because of the fact that the defense, if it stays healthy, is kind of back to that level of, outside of the corners, which could be a little bit questionable against certain teams. It's back to a point where you can ask them to go get you multiple stops in a row. You can ask them to go get turnovers. You can ask them to keep teams under 20 points. And it's not going to be as difficult as it's been, especially last year. But my biggest reservation with this team, outside of roster, outside of everything else, is, can Kenny Pickett, within the confines of Matt Canada's offense, have any chance of being actually truly productive in the passing game? Because the stuff we saw last year, he was a rookie, obviously. He missed some throws, of course. They missed some plays. This team has been designed, since really Ben's injury post that time, to get the football out quickly, and they don't care about explosive plays. They don't care about throwing the ball down the field. They don't care about any of that. They want to get 4 yards every play. That's literally how this offense is designed.
That's so funny that they drafted Kenny Pickett, because of all the quarterbacks, he's not the one I want doing that for me.
Exactly.
Like, he plays like he's Mahomes. You got to lean into that. Like,
yeah, and that's what my issue with this team is this year. Is I like what they've done, and I think that the roster is strong enough to really compete this year truly for the playoffs. But if Matt Canada doesn't let Kenny Pickett, or give him the confidence to go, okay, I have this play, but if it doesn't work, it's on me. Like, I got to go make a play. If he doesn't have that ability to, or if he's not given the reins to do so, this offense isn't going to be much better, almost no matter what they do. It doesn't matter what the personnel is. It doesn't matter how much better they are certain things. If they can't run the offense more efficiently and also more explosively, they're going to have a very set limit on what they can do offensively. Like, Pickett is probably going to struggle to throw for more than 3,500 yards in this offense if it's run the same way as it was last year. Like, it's just how it is. Like, and that's a problem. It just is. If you can't create explosive plays in the passing game, not only because you just can't, which is, I think, the last year, part of that was they just really couldn't do it very often, but now it's because you just don't want to. Like, they legitimately didn't seem interested in trying to create explosive plays last year most of the time. if that's how you're going to run the offense, you're putting a limit on yourself purposely, right? That's what I wanted to. That's the main reason I wanted to see Canada go. It's not just how bad he's been, but they need someone who's willing to come in and say, okay, this is how Kenny Pickett wants to play. How can I build the offense in a way where it gives him the opportunity to do that naturally, and also instills confidence in him to go make a play when he needs to? Because we saw last year when we needed a play last year down the stretch, who was making it? It was the quarterback doing it himself. This was not Matt Canada drawing up a beautiful play. It wasn't any like it was Kenny making the throw or making a play, getting out of the sack with the Ravens game, throwing the ball at Najee for a touchdown, stuff like that. Like that's how we were winning football games down the stretch. And if Mike Tomlin and if Matt Canada don't see that and aren't willing to lean into that, you're going to see probably a very similar season to last year, which is you're going to be competitive down the stretch, but are you going to be a playoff competitor? Probably not if you don't let him at least have some loosening of the reins there. But
there's
anything else you guys want to add there? Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
It's funny because we're going to be talking about this team next, but I'd say there were two offensive rosters in the NFL who both desperately needed a schematic change that Todd Monken was easily the best answer in the entire coaching world for. He would have been a perfect insert as offensive coordinator to both the Ravens and the Steelers. Unfortunately for the Steelers, the Ravens went out and did it. But imagine, just the pieces on this offense, Todd Monken would have Kenny Pickett slinging for 4,500 yards. It would be a beauty to watch.
The Steelers have a penchant. They do not fire coaches. They let their contract run out. And guess what? Matt Cannon's contract didn't run out last year, so he's still here. And I don't understand it. I think that most fans are just willing to just say, this is just how the team is. I don't really care about that. At some point, you need to change. Look at what Omar Khan's done with the roster. He's changed how this team builds its roster. They need to also change their philosophy around coaching. They have to be willing to go out and get guys who clearly have shown the promise to be able to come in and change what's been an issue for this team. And until they're willing to do that, again, obviously I don't anticipate Matt getting any more years with us unless magically he decides oh man, I have to coach for my job. I'm going to do stuff different. And it seems like everything he's saying, he doesn't want to do anything different. He wants to run his offense the way it's been. And he just thinks it's going to be better because Kenny Pickett's going to be better. I'm that's great. You're still limiting him to 3,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. That's the limit on this offense. If you're not willing to change things up, you're going to get similar results, maybe a little bit better, just because Kenny's better in second year. And it's going to be frustrating. It is, because there's going to be weeks where this team obliterates other offenses, completely shuts them down, and the offense refuses to comply, and they don't do anything either. And it's a 17-14 loss or a 13-10 loss. It's going to happen if they run the offense the same way. And to your point, Zach, you talked about whether you think this team could win this division. I think that because of how they're probably going to run their team and run their offense, they probably do have the lowest chance of actually winning the division. I think that they have a higher ceiling or higher floor than most, especially the Browns, because of.
I was going to say, I think,
but
Pickett,
their ceiling,
your floor is higher.
Their ceiling just isn't as high as it should be because they refuse to upgrade an offensive coordinator, and they have for the last few years. Even when they promoted Matt Canada, they did it because he worked with Ben, and Ben wanted to do things his way. And now that Ben's gone, they're still sticking to him, and it's you don't have the reason to stick with him anymore. Even that was a bad reason, but at least I understood it to a certain degree. Now you have the ability to go find your guy, let Kenny pick and be all right, this is what I kind of want to do. This is what I did in college that made me so successful my last year. All this stuff, it's there for the taking, and they have not done it. So, and I'm not going to spiel on it too hard, and this is my team. I don't want to take up all the time for it, but I'll run through some positive negatives for this team again. Kenny Pickett year 2. You're hoping to see a jump from him personally. Best offensive line they've had since the mid to late 2010s, for sure, talent-wise and just build-wise. The pass rush, when healthy, will be one of the best in the NFL with Cam Hayward, with TJ Watt, with Alex Highsmith. That group, especially those three, are going to be, when they're healthy, one of the best in the league. And then Mike Tomlin is the coach of this team. So that's really all I have to say about that. Negatives, how much better can Pickett be with Matt Canada? We just talked about it, with him still there. How much more productive, how much more efficient can he really be? Will the run game be efficient enough to be their offensive identity? So if they can't average more than the 4 yards per carry they did last year, it doesn't matter how much they run the ball if it's not efficient, right? Najee has to be more efficient, which I think down the stretch he was much more efficient when he got his legs under him. You could tell he wasn't really super healthy to start the year. Jalen Warren was really explosive in the touches he got, and hopefully he can keep that up. He got rocked up in the offseason, by the way. He looks ridiculous. I don't know what he was doing. I think he said he was doing hills and stuff like that, and working at the Jerry Rice workout. But dude looks insane. So hopefully he's really productive. And again, they brought in guys to help with the run game. So we'll see if they can do that. And then last thing I touched on it with weaknesses. Will the corners be like the corners are both young and old? It's kind of a weird mix. Like they're either older players or like late 20s, early 30s, or very young. Will they hold up often enough to let the pass rush really truly get after it the way that they possibly could? So, but any other notes you guys want to add before we do predictions here?
Just to go down my list, I do really think that what Kenny Pickett showed down the stretch is a viable NFL quarterback, even potentially an elevator. Obviously, we're not going to see that until Canada's gone, like you said.
I don't think so, unfortunately. No.
I do have a lot of caution with the skill group just because of the lack of depth. I think that if you're rolling out Deontay Johnson and George Pickens as your 1-2, like George Pickens to me should be a 3, but
I will say I'm very high on George because of what he's already good at, and I'm hoping he can expand his skill set. But if he doesn't, he's going to.
I really struggle to see anything other than like Devontae Parker when I watch him play. Man, I hope to God I see separation in this kid this year, because otherwise,
Hey, but at least he can make
Gabe Davis
catches.
At a ceiling. Like,
I mean,
that's the
key.
Will
make those catches though, unlike Devontae Parker.
if you're always going to be covered, you better have the best hands in the league, and he's up there.
Yeah, but, that's why it's like his skill set as it stands. If it doesn't get better, if he can continue to do what he's doing, he's going to be very effective. It's just whether or not he can expand that skill set.
Yeah, that's why I would like him to be the number 3.
If you have Gunnar Olszewski taking significant snaps on offense,
Calvin Austin's back this year, Zach.
You got Miles Boykin, Hakeem Butler's making his comeback now. So the lack of depth behind the top 2 receivers is very concerning. And then similarly at tight end, I think you have a stud in Freiermuth who. The reason I think the offense works is because Freiermuth is your number 2 target, right? It goes Deontay Johnson, Freiermuth, George Pickens. That's how I'm justifying things in my brain.
Honestly, I think there's going to be a lot of moments this year, and I wanted to touch on this real quick, Tony. I'll let you continue in a second. But when we run 11 personnel, it should be Pratt Freiermuth in the slot. That's who should be playing the slot receiver role in this game. Like, I understand, like you were talking about as a blocker. I actually don't really view him as a guy who can block much at all at this point in his career. I don't know if he's ever going to be a great player in that regard, but you don't have to be if you're playing slot receiver in 11 personnel. Like you can block on the move. Like I think that him as an inline tight end, he's still good in that role, but I'd rather him be split out and just can use his receiving skills. And that's why part of the reason I think they brought in Darnell Washington is they hope he can be the like true like inline tight end in those sets and allow them to split him out and do more things with him. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I do think that's also their justification for getting rid of Chase Claypool is that Freiermuth does everything he did, but he does it well. Whereas Claypool did it terribly inconsistently. Right. So if there's no injuries to the offensive weapons, then they're good. If there's a single injury at any of the spots, it's terribly ugly very quickly. And then defensively, it's going to be the strength of this team, but I am terribly concerned about the back 7. Now the safeties answer a lot of questions, especially Minka Fitzpatrick. He
makes up for a good bit.
But I mean, the linebacker position, I guess it is an upgrade over last year, but it's still just dog shit.
Upgrade. The problem with it is if Holcomb's healthy, I think that he's going to be the best linebacker we've had in a few years because I did like his tape at Washington.
And he's very much a high floor play, right? Like there's no ceiling to be had there.
Probably not. No.
And then cornerback and specifically slot cornerback. Like so cornerback, Pat Pete, he showed that last year, he still has gas. I just don't know how much. Joey Porter Jr.
as a rookie,
y'all know my thoughts about him. I wasn't super high on him. And then like if you're starting Chandon Sullivan in your slot, it's scary. You have there's studs on the back end, there's studs up front, but that middle part of your defense, it's scary. I expect the team to be able to scheme up around that, and there's very few teams that I think could survive a cornerback linebacker group that looks like this, but and the Steelers are one of them. But I do think that that's a major weakness on an otherwise stellar defense
and linebacker depth. Too if one of those guys goes down, it doesn't look good.
I mean, you got Landon Roberts, Mark Robinson, like not a whole lot else besides that. Tanner Muse is like a weird like hybrid safety linebacker. Like it's
Yeah,
the
he was
one
a
thing with
safety
this.
at Clemson, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's played a little bit of both in the NFL, but it's definitely one of those situations where because of the fact that there's certain weaknesses on the defense, I've seen them do better with worse in this era of Steelers defense. So like I'm not as concerned about it as like other teams probably would be, like you said, Tony. But it's still possible if the bottom falls out, if Pat P can't run at all and can't do any man coverage, which he really probably can't. He's probably mostly his own guy at this point. If Porter Jr. does have to play and he isn't ready to play, which I think is definitely possible. As much as I am very high on him compared to you, Tony, I get that. I still question him as a rookie. I mean, it's just hard to ask most corners. I mean, you're not everybody can be Sauce Gardner. Just it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, he is the exception.
So, exactly.
Or Tariq Woolen.
Yeah, even Tariq, yeah. But like that's just kind of how it is. Like you have to hope that these guys can hold up well enough. And I think the slot role, admittedly, is going to probably be the worst spot on this whole team. Maybe it's going to have to be by committee. Like it can't be just Chan Sullivan. It can't just you can't do that. It's going to be tough.
I think we're going to see a lot more, and they did this a little bit last year, where they kind of play through Minka in the middle, like kind of even dropping into the box, like so we could see. If they get really creative with it, we could see Minka play the slot for them and
in certain matchups
allow them to run a really diverse coverage shells. And I don't know, like you're going to have to get creative because of that. Like you have a superstar who can play a lot of positions and a lot of around him. They'll have to get creative.
Yeah, I can see certain matchups, especially like they've already kind of had him like against tight ends who line up in the slot. He's that guy for them. Like he just mans up with them and deals with them.
What the Rams did with Ramsey in his last couple of years. I could see that
something like that for sure. I think it just depends like how much they trust whoever that third corner is going to be, and I think that's going to be heavily dependent on training camp and how things look in that situation. But let's get into predictions here. This is probably one of the lowest ranges I'll give any team in the league this year. My prediction for their floor 9-8 because they don't lose 9 games in the 17-game season now, especially just doesn't happen, and I don't expect it to happen this year when they have a better roster than they had last year. So. It's kind of simple there. I think 11-6 is about as best as you could get out of this team. I think that's asking a little bit too, just because their schedule isn't super easy, especially down the stretch. They have like a 5-game stretch at the end of the year that's just brutal. Like they got to win at least like 2 of those games, I think.
Oh, they should win the first 2.
Yeah, I'm saying, but
it's New England and Indianapolis. They should win the first 2.
The last 5 games?
Yeah, New England.
Maybe I'm thinking the last 3.
Seattle, Baltimore.
The last 3 are
Cincinnati,
absolute
Seattle, Baltimore. Yeah, but the 2
those
are
last
New England
like
and
if
Indianapolis.
They got to win at least like one of those last 3 games. I think too, especially if they're in the fringe at the end of the year. So, but I think that 11-6 is probably the most they could muster, and that's if Kenny Pickett does his absolute best to avoid Matt Canada's existence and just kind of does whatever he wants to do, which I'm still hoping he kind of does. That's what I kind of have for them this year. But let's go ahead, Tony.
So I have a 10-win ceiling on them. Pretty much
again,
same reasons you said. I would call it 11 wins if it were anybody other than Matt Canada.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that at all. So,
and then their floor, I put 8 wins, but there's an asterisk. It's 8 wins if they get a tie somewhere else. I refuse to acknowledge that they can get a losing record, but I do think that they can get a perfectly even record at 8-1.
We've done almost something like that. So yeah, good.
Yeah. I'm firmly 9-8, 10-7. I don't see much chance for them to win the division, but I think they could slide into like a third or second, like they have been, and like live and die by the wild card. But I'm very intrigued to talk about the team we get to talk about next because I think they had the best offseason.
They made the biggest move by just not pivoting, honestly, which we'll talk about. Moving on to the Ravens now. Strengths remain for this team: quarterback because Lamar is still around. That's huge. We'll talk more about that. Tight end with Mark Andrews, of course. I try not to use tight end as a strength unless you're like top 3, just because like I feel like that position is very top heavy. But I do love obviously Pat. I will say he's a strength for that team.
Well, I think they have a good duo. They have a good.
They have a really good tight end.
They like as well.
It will likely be the.
I was a big
duo.
Charlie Kolar guy myself, but I don't think
for
he has to play. But I was a big fan of him and his third tight end probably. Linebacker with Roquan Smith. He's one of the best, like just middle linebackers in general. And then you hope that because he's there, the Patrick Queen can be more of a piece like it was last year, where he's not going to be asked to do a lot, so he can kind of be just like a heat-seeking missile type. and just let him do that. So I think that linebacker room is going to be pretty strong. And then safety, I really like their duo they have there at safety at this point. I really like that group. Corner with Marlon Humphrey is Rocky Sin they brought in, which was smart because they need someone else. Like it's kind of top heavy, so secondary in general is not bad, but I didn't want to put just secondary. Weaknesses, wide receiver maybe if Odell is not good and Rashad Bateman gets hurt like he always does. Like the receiver group is much better equipped like to start the year than it's been, but is it going to be a strength? I don't know. Running back because of injury questions and like Dobbins, like when he was healthy, he's been pretty good, but like is he going to stay healthy? Pass rush, I have a lot of questions about as well. And then corner, like I said, we talked about, like it's kind of a question mark outside of the two top guys. And even Rocky Sin was, really good last year, I think, honestly, but kind of questionable over the course of his career. So, anything you guys want to add with strength weaknesses there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting team. As opposed to the whole like what we said, Allen Robinson and all that. Like I don't know. I'm actually very high on Odell. The last time we saw him, he was playing good football. He was on course,
and you hope
to be the Super Bowl MVP. And I really don't see that big of a drop off for him because like he is one of those people that's like, he's got this crazy athletic skill. I like Rashad Bateman. Now, is he your number one? No, I imagine that Odell and him will probably flip once Odell gets back.
Don't say that to Lamar's face, though.
Nope.
He's been calling Bateman wide receiver one all offseason.
When Bateman is healthy, he's one of my favorite. Like he was one of my favorite players coming out in the draft this year.
I do like this the Zay Flowers pick. That was fantastic. And yeah, I mean the biggest thing for Baltimore is they played the long game and it worked out good for both parties. Lamar Jackson got a contract that was worthy of his skill and his skill set for the team. And the Ravens got a much more friendlier deal for their team to be able to do other things besides be like, hey, here's everything. I also like their offensive line. I think they have a really strong offensive line.
I do think that's the reason I didn't put it as a strength is I just don't know if I can trust that Ronnie Stanley's going to play 5 games for this team.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like I don't know. I mean, when he's played, he's been so good in the past, but like if he can't go for a full season and left tackle's an issue, it's kind of just, especially now that they are going to probably, and we'll talk about this, move to a more diverse passing offense that can actually like drop back and throw the football a little bit. Having that left tackle not hold up if he doesn't could be an issue, but overall, like especially that starting 5 could be strong.
I will say, like Pat McCarry's had to fill in multiple times.
He has, and he's a
good football player. Like I think he'd be a comfortable starter on a lot of teams.
Right.
Yeah, and their front 7 too. I love their front 7. Very, very disruptive.
I just need to see something out of the edge group. That's what I'm saying. The interior, I think, is up there with the top of the league. Yes. I need to see it out of Odafe Owe, like David Ojabo. Well. Like they have the guys there. We just have to see them actually do it.
Yeah.
Well, Ojabo was injured for most of the season last year, right?
He was. Yeah, exactly. That's why,
so he's very unproven. Yeah.
I think they have good players in the room. I haven't seen them be good players yet. Is my concern.
Yeah,
especially Owe really kind of took a nosedive after his rookie season. That was surprisingly strong.
I did put in my notes for this team, bring in more pass rush, and I'll outright pick them to win the division. Like Justin Houston is still out there.
If he's still out there, Justin Houston's still out there.
Like if you bring back Justin Houston, I might just straight up say they're winning the division.
Might want to pick him back up, honestly. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that we can move into real quick the positives for this team from going into this year from last year. Lamar sticks around, right? They get that done. We talked about that. Biggest thing that they could do is if they wanted to maintain their ability to compete, they had to bring him back in some capacity, whatever the deal was. New offensive coordinator Todd Monken brings a professional passing game for the first time since Lamar has been in the league. Like this is just the first time he's going to have a chance to actually have an offense that can build upon what he's done as a passer in his career, right? Allow him to kind of show those skills that he's gained. And with the receivers, if they're healthy, very solid group of players, and it's not going to limit the offense at all for sure. Health should be better after firing much maligned strength coach Steve Saunders. You hope this team could finally actually be healthy for a full season. Maybe I don't, but I still want to see.
If Lamar gets his flu shot, put the league.
Yeah, put the flu shot on. Yeah, get him shoot him up with everything you've got to prevent illness.
Tdap.
Make sure he's getting his fiber intake good, so he doesn't have to worry about random moments in the game. All that stuff. Whatever you got to do, just give it to him all.
I'm sure there's diapers that don't affect mobility.
Probably,
right? Like,
yeah. I don't know, maybe. But again, it's all about Lamar in the passing game taking a step up now that they have someone who can actually give them a shot. Like, we know what he can do with his legs. We know what this run game can do with the guys, even though, I question the running back health and stuff like that. We know what they can do. So it's really about how much better can this passing offense get. Negatives, pass rush is young and most improved. We talked about that. Running back room, again, is talented with Dobbins, but very injury prone at this point. Like, all the guys in that room miss time, so it's just tough to ask them to play the whole season. And then can Odell and Bateman stay healthy? If those two can stay healthy and Zay Flowers can be a complementary players year one and not have to be the guy, which I think he would be if either of those guys go down, this passing offense could be very, very good even in the first year with new offensive coordinator. So, anything you guys want to add before we do predictions for them?
Yeah, I think expanding on your point on the skill group, like the wide receivers, I think this is the first time Lamar's had a NFL wide receiver room.
Yeah, actually, like NFL caliber receiver.
He's had NFL starters before,
yes,
but he's never had an NFL wide receiver room.
Right
now he does. If Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, and Zay Flowers, like if one of those guys misses time. Devin Duvernay was fun last year. We know he's not
still going
to be a NFL like receiver, but he can fill in.
Yes.
Even guys like Nelson Aguilar could fill in and be
he's
NFL
played in the
players.
NFL. Yeah,
it's not like you're jumping down to the Andy Isabellas of the world, the James Proches of the world,
the Laquan Treadwell.
Most random.
You're bringing in.
Citing last year's Andy Isabella on the Ravens. So funny.
Yeah, like so I think that's a strength where like no matter what happens, Lamar will be surrounded with NFL talent. Right. The biggest strength is that there's an adult in the offensive meeting rooms designing plays around his players. There is somebody who has grown up in this current version of the world and acknowledges how you win in football and is going to try to do those things. So that's like the biggest strength I can think of. And then defensively, they were one of the best defenses in the league last year in terms of adapting to the opponent. I think Mike McDonald and Lou Anarumo are really up there. I guess I'd still say whatever the brainchild of Steve and Bill Belichick is, like maybe those three are the best at just completely abandoning whatever their philosophy is to make sure that they're hurting the opposing offense. It's really these three different defenses, and so we get a full year under Mike McDonald, or his second year in the NFL now, and with better players with Roquan in that system, like this, it has the potential to be the best defense in the league. Honestly, I'd say they have the potential to have the best offense in the league, and we know that John Harbaugh was a special teams coach, and they have the best kicker in the league. So strengths. Everything that was bad about this team is new.
Yes.
I'd also say weaknesses. Everything that was bad about this team is new. So like we don't know, but we can project significant upside for this team.
Right. Anything you want to add there, Zach?
No. This is like I said, they had the biggest offseason of any team in this division because they went out and addressed the problems that they had. Whether they did that. For the positive, for the negative, but they address the problems. Now, as we said, the new issues on this team are brand new issues that we're not going to find out until they start playing football on September 10th. But I'm excited. This is the team that I'm like, they brought the quarterback back. They got him some help that he desperately needed to actually run a NFL offense. I'm ready to see Heisman version of Lamar Jackson.
We're getting his second MVP trophy potentially. I'm excited.
Right. That's what you want to say. I just, before I do my prediction, a quick note. I think Greg Roman played too much NCAA 14 or something. Like I think that's what his problem is. Like he just like, oh man, the triple option is so good. The option's so good, man. We gotta just.
What is this? Georgia Tech?
You know what? Yeah, I firmly believe Greg Roman could go into the college ranks and have a dominant offense.
Unbelievable.
I just don't think that can happen in the NFL.
He could go into the ACC and destroy every single person because, like, look, you guys know I'm a Virginia Tech fan. Every year we would wait for the game against Georgia Tech because we'll be cruising, and all of a sudden it's like, oh hey, the triple option's coming to town. You know what you got to do.
They don't even do the triple option the way they used to.
But when I was there,
it's just kind of sad, right? Like
it's just a recent development in a couple of years. Like you can't go away from that. It's just even though the academies are moving away from it.
Yes.
Like they are a little bit.
That's terrible. The academies should be permanent triple option.
You know it's coming, and they still drop 600 rushing yards on you, and it's just like,
so funny.
What the hell?
Oh man, but no, not to get too much into college football. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point in a different show. But two predictions here. So I'm gonna put the floor at like 8 and 9, 9 and 8 if Lamar gets hurt and all the receivers die and like the defense can't hold up a corner because Marlon Humphrey or somebody gets hurt. Like it's going to take injuries and like regression from players. Because again, this team has been consistently almost like the Steelers in the sense of like they're really not ever out of it. Really, like they're kind of hanging around no matter what happens. I mean, even Lamar getting hurt, late in the year last year, like they were I think 8-3 at one point with him as a starter, which was stupid because the way
7-4, unfortunately. But
one of the like just stupid considering all the issues they're having. But and then this could be a 12-13 win team, guys. I really can't. Like, I think this is a team like because it's AFC, I kind of knocked them a point just because again it's the AFC. But like 13 wins is not out of the question. And I do think that they certainly could win this division. And honestly, it doesn't take a whole lot to go right for them to be in contention for it. It's just like with Lamar in an actual offense, and I know I'm going to get hurt by saying this because I know I don't want him to do it to us, and he hasn't so far. But I'm waiting for the game where Lamar destroys me, and I'm waiting for it because I know he can do it, and I worry that it's going to be this year one of the games. Like it could be if it's ever going to happen, this would be the year because we've kept him so in check, like in the games we played against him. But at some point, the dam's going to break, and I think this might be the year he does it. So, but that's what I'll say for that. What do you think, Tony?
So I guess just to level set, because you were saying 13 wins. The AFC is incredibly stacked. So the way I'm doing this is there's only one team I'm going to give a ceiling of 17 wins. Then the rest of them, if I am saying you have a ceiling of 14 wins, it means that I think you are a bona fide Super Bowl contender, can win the AFC.
Fair enough. Yeah.
There's going to be 3 teams that I think get that designation from me. So with that being said, of all of the question mark contenders, so we know that the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills in the AFC at least, I think we'd reasonably call true contenders. Like we just accept that they've been there. Like it's been a 3-year thing now. All 3 teams, they're juggernauts. Like the Bills haven't gotten to the Super Bowl. Boo-hoo. They're there every year. Deal with it. Yeah. Of all the question mark contenders, so this is where I'd stick like the Ravens, the Chargers, the Dolphins, those teams that by every right can win the Super Bowl, but we're not ready to put them in that top grouping yet. I'm most confident in the Ravens ceiling. I think that makes sense. They were 7-4 leading the division. It was by a tiebreaker, semantics, but they were leading the division at 7-4 when Lamar got injured. They still managed to make the playoffs, and if it weren't for the biggest freak goal line fumble return for a touchdown, they would have beaten the Bengals and probably made my life a lot better in the process. Probably. But so this is a damn good team. I think that they have a 14-win ceiling. That means I think they are every bit able to win the AFC, every bit able to win the Super Bowl. I think they have a 10-win floor. I was considering calling it an 11-win floor, but and I'm not really baking an injury to these floors, which is probably explains the gap there. But if this team is healthy, I'd be shocked if they win less than 10 games. I'd be shocked if they win less than 11 games. Really,
I would be too. If they're healthy. Yeah,
this is I've been begging for it for a couple of years now. Let Lamar play in space. I was harping on that point when we were first having these conversations earlier this offseason. Now that Todd Monken's there, I just think that there's no ceiling on this team. They can be so good.
All right, what do you got for us?
Let me dust off my hot take shoulders. This is the second best team in the AFC behind the Kansas City Chiefs currently.
All right,
I'm firmly on it. As Tony said, he's giving the Chiefs 17-game ceiling. I agree. If you put the Ravens in the NFC, I think you can give them the same 17-game ceiling. There's a few other ones, but right now it is Kansas City Chiefs until they prove me wrong, and the Baltimore Ravens. I'm very excited to see, because like, yeah, I understand what we're saying about like question mark contender, but they were only question mark contender last year because they fell out with injuries. The years before they were dominating.
Yeah, I think it's just back-to-back years of that kind of fizzle out with injury.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So I'm excited. The move from Greg Roman was very much needed. Floor wise, I agree with Tony. I think this is a 10-11 win floor. And when you're talking about a 10-11 win floor, that's a really
they
good
should be
team.
They should be expected to win that many games.
Yeah, they should be.
If you're
They
betting
should be
on this team like that. That's where you start, is that
yes
10 plus wins. Yeah.
And I firmly have them over Cincinnati, because and we're gonna talk about them a little bit, but like, again, this team addressed all of their issues and did so pretty effectively. It's time to see what happens and what new issues they have, because like right now I'm not seeing like it's all about, can these players come back and be what we're expecting. It's not like, oh man, they'll play what they're, but oh, look at this hole right here. We've been saying with like the Browns and the Steelers. No, this is a complete full team.
Fair enough. All right, let's get into the Bengals real quick here. Again, probably not as much to talk about with them, because of course they are the reigning division champs,
and they haven't done anything.
They didn't do a lot. So let's get into this real quick. Their one major move is one that I still am a little bit questionable about. We will talk about it, but we'll do strengths real quick. Of course, quarterback with Joe Burrow. Wide receiver group is as far as top three goes. Unless someone wants to make an argument, I don't think you can really make any argument about who the best top three is, like the top trio in the league. I think that we could see as soon as next year, Seattle, if Lockett stays healthy, could be getting up there close to them. But that's not here or there. We'll talk about them later. Edge, I do like their edge group. I like Sam Hubbard, what he brings. I think
and Trey Hendrickson.
And Hendrickson he's lived up to what they expected from him so far.
He's blown past it.
Exactly.
It was they overpaid for what he was, and then he just
exactly. He actually
what's wild is I saw this coming when he was with the Saints, because he was down there with Cam Jordan and all that, getting the free rushes, and then the Bengals paid for him. I was like, oh, okay. I was hoping to keep him, but
let's see if he can stick around and do that. But I like them. The interior defensive line with DJ Reader and BJ Hill, like, really, really tough to run against. Like, that is a really tough interior defensive line as well. Weaknesses, I still think corner with Awuzie coming back from an injury. I wonder how good he's going to be. And then the other corners are just kind of question marks for me, really. We'll see what they can do. I think the upside is there. Nick Scott, is he going to be a strong safety for this team? Like, who's like Dax Hill?
They have on ESPN
I like Dax Hill a lot as a player. I really do. I think that's why they drafted him, was to replace Jesse Bates. But losing both your starting safeties, I know safety isn't the most important position on the field, but that's tough for a team that the secondary is already a little bit questionable. And then I still think like this offensive line, Orlando Brown Jr. is an upgrade. Okay, he is. I'm not going to sit here and say he's not. I don't think he's enough of an upgrade for me to say this offensive line is suddenly not going to be a problem for this team. I really just don't think so.
It wasn't a problem last year. We're a couple years removed from the offensive line being a problem for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
All right.
I would say my two biggest question marks on this team at the moment are, what are Joe Mixon's legal statuses for the coming season?
Because I am curious if anything's going to happen with that.
If he does not play, then I really don't.
Chase Brown season.
Yeah. And also, ironically, I mean, Irv Smith Jr. isn't bad, but they have the weakest tight end.
Yeah,
I think they're just like we'll just I think they're kind of just like we'll whatever.
Like Joe Burrow only likes those occasionally, anyways. Let's not spend money.
Like that's what I think it's seriously. We'll just.
Irv Smith Jr., Drew Sample, Devin Asiasi, and Tanner Hudson. Devin Asiasi made famous from the double tight end New England Patriots draft.
Yeah,
and then they turned around the next offseason and double paid Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry.
Yeah,
only one of whom is on the team anymore.
The other one was Dalton Keene, and that one really hurts because
Dalton
I really
Keene.
wanted him to.
Virginia
turn
Tech
out well.
fan,
Yeah,
yes, of course.
Yeah.
The tight end group's certainly a weakness. I honestly just kind of didn't even pay attention to it because like Irv Smith, whatever.
So like Irv Smith's not bad. He actually was doing really well in Minnesota last year, but again, that's another place where they were like, tight end.
Yeah, Irv Smith is good when he plays, kind of, but like he just doesn't play.
Where's Kyle Rudolph?
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason why T.J. Hawkinson's Viking. Let me put it that way. But again, for me, this team, I don't see them being significantly different necessarily. I just don't know if they've done anything to be a better football team. And I think that's where a lot of the Ravens, can the Ravens win this division and should they be the favorites, come into play, is because they haven't really made, in my opinion, a step up. They've kind of just, again, they brought some in
sideways.
Yeah, they brought in more help at tackle, but they lose safety. The corner's a little bit questionable still. Miles Murphy is the first round pick. We haven't talked a ton about rookies because a lot of the time they don't factor in too much, but is he going to really play that much? Is he going to have to play much? Like, he's not probably going to be a true impact, I imagine, because Hubbard's still there and Hendricks
he's
still
their
there.
fourth, fifth rusher.
He's going to be, Joe Osai, despite his penalty, I'm sure will still be plenty factored in. Like, I don't know if they drafted anybody that's going to move the needle too much in year one, and because of that, how much better can this team really be than they already are? Not saying they're not already great, but again, the Ravens made a concerted effort to fix a lot of their issues and to try to come back strong, whereas I think the Bengals are just kind of keeping things stable to a certain degree.
So because we're about to get into talking more, like in upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about more of these super team contenders.
Yes, Chiefs.
Viewing
Bills,
teams within themselves and how much they improved over an individual offseason, I don't think is the right way to look at it, because like the Bengals, had they done anything major this offseason to improve, they kind of just would have shut the window sooner and not done really anything to help them this year. Like they're still, top 3 team in the league. They didn't need to go out and do anything. The only thing they needed to do was make sure that when the time comes, they're able to pay the guys that matter.
Yes, so, they have to make sure their contracts.
This offseason, I see as a win for them. They didn't add anything crazy, but
not
last offseason was a loss for the Chiefs. Yeah. When we're talking about these super teams, I don't know if improvement is the right, they didn't improve, and I think they still maintained a pretty hefty lead over their division, as high as I am on the Ravens.
I guess specifically with this division, with talking about the Bengals and the Ravens, the Ravens massively improved their offense, and the Bengals lost Jesse Bates. That's where I'm like,
Which, I mean, that was planned, though. I will say, you weren't going to pay Jesse Bates, $16 million.
That's where I go to. All right, so are they that confident in Dax Hill and Nick Scott being able to stop Lamar Jackson?
Dax Hill probably, Nick Scott not so much. I think he's
so that's where I'm like.
I am extremely confident that if Big Lou has NFL players,
he'll be all right.
He'll do something with
he'll
them.
be all right. Yeah, probably. Yeah, admittedly. Yeah.
What I see as the positives for this team is they got another year of Big Lou. It's a gift. This is.
Yeah, I wonder how long this is going to last.
No, this is the last year of it. But he is the best defensive coordinator in the league. We're talking about this guy, no matter who his personnel is, no matter who he's going up against, he's going to pitch a perfect game in terms of play calling. Now, maybe you get beat because the other team's better, but you are never at a schematic disadvantage on defense when Big Lou is calling plays for you. And the fact that they have him for another year. And then the other thing, they lost the safeties, and that I think that matters. It matters a lot, but they have their 5 most important defensive players maybe are all on contract years, specifically along the defensive line. And I mean, we know guys get a boost in their contract years. So they didn't have to change much. I think this defense might be better. Even though they lost the safeties, this defense might be better. They still have Mike Hilton. He's the one who matters out of the I always look at the safeties and the slot cornerback as a trio kind of together. They kept the most important of those 3, and that was Mike Hilton.
Unfortunately for me, yeah.
So I think that they had a really good offseason despite not really doing much.
I mean, they maintain, like I said, the status quo, which I think is really important for a team at the top of the league, like you said, Tony, where you don't hemorrhage anything crazy. You don't lose a player because you can't pay them. You don't, this or that. Which, again, Jesse Bates, but they built that into their plan. They drafted Dax Hill. They drafted Dax Hill because they thought he could be that replacement as a true free safety type. And I do believe they're right about that, so I can't really say anything about that.
They're drafting ahead, which I love.
Yes, you have to with your team.
They got Cam Taylor-Britt last year, and he played some good football. He got some good exposure.
You hope he can be a starter this year full time, yeah.
Exactly. Same thing with Dax Hill. I think they did the same thing this year. Like they drafted Miles Murphy 1 year ahead of all their edge players coming up. They drafted DJ Turner as another dart throw in that cornerback room.
Because Awuzie is probably going to be gone soon.
Yeah, and I mean, y'all know DJ Turner was my my favorite cornerback in the draft back when we did that show.
Yeah.
Despite being Wolverine,
fun player. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think the upgrade at left tackle is an upgrade. I know your feelings on him, and I agree with most of your thoughts. I
still think it's an upgrade. It's still an upgrade. It is. It's just like that's why I'm not going to blame them too much because you still got an upgrade at left tackle. It's good to have, but yeah, I just don't think it moves the needle the way some people thought. I'll say that, Tony. That's all I'll say.
So yeah, I do think though, like everything that Orlando Brown Jr. is bad at is mitigated by the play style of Joe Burrow because he was in a complete mismatch when Patrick Mahomes is running around behind you and you don't know what spot you're blocking for. It gets really difficult when you're not an athlete, and we all know Orlando Brown isn't an athlete. But when you're blocking for Joe Burrow, who's going to get the ball out quickly and you know exactly where he's going to be, it's a lot easier to play left tackle. So like I do think that Orlando Brown is better for the Bengals than he is for the majority of teams in the NFL.
That's fair. Also, I do think that Orlando Brown needed the Bengals more than the Bengals needed Orlando Brown Jr. In the sense that, because if he wants to live up to this contract, there's not, like you said, there's not many better places to go play left tackle with his skill set than it is with the Bengals because of the fact that Burrow won phenomenal against pressure, despite the fact that he's constantly been under. Like even going back to LSU, like I can't remember the exact number, but I was writing like a piece about his time at LSU and going into the NFL for someone, I don't remember what it was, and he was a better quarterback in terms of passer rating, like college passer rating, than he was when he was not under pressure in college. Like that, that's how good he was against pressure. So that is why when there was, and I know we have differences depending on like how good or bad the offensive line has been, Burrow makes up for a lot of that. Like even if he's taking sacks, he takes them. He's like, I'm just whatever, I don't care. I'm going to make plays anyway. Like has mitigated that to where it hasn't really truly been an issue because of the fact that he. So that should only make it easier for them. So, but let's get into the prediction here because again, I think we kind of know about this team. Let's get this taken care of. I can't see them being worse than like weirdly enough their Super Bowl regular season. Like that's kind of the floor.
Yeah, they weren't a very good team for that run.
They really like it was weird, but like that's about the worst, and that's just because they're still a very similar team to that. It's just like if things don't go well, or like God forbid somebody gets hurt in the receiver group or whatever, like that's really where you could see them fall off a little bit wins wise. But again, kind of the same way. Like I think that they're firmly up in that 13-14 win ceiling, like the other top teams in the AFC are. Like that's kind of where it starts. And like we'll talk about, like you said, your team that you think has infinitely a 17 game ceiling because of who their quarterback is and who their play caller is. Like there's that, but everyone else is kind of in that, like if you want to be a contender, you're up in that 13-14 win ceiling. So, but what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, same. I've got the 14 win ceiling label on them. That wasn't hard for me to get there.
No,
and similar, 11 win floor. I don't think, barring injury, this team is. We know exactly who they are, and they're going to kill a lot of the NFL. I even put first bullet point: remain a wagon, but this division is coming for them. So like, yes, the path is getting harder. I'll probably have that same exact phrase under the Bills. Like, yeah, things are getting harder, but you're still ahead until I see anything to prove me otherwise.
Yeah, you have to see something to prove otherwise. Yeah. What do you think, Zach?
The only thing I think that could be bad for them is they do have the first place schedule, which means they're going to play a bit tougher games. And like you do end up having to play Kansas City. You do have to play San Francisco.
Which admittedly in the regular season really hasn't been a problem for them so far.
Well, yeah.
But it's still the Chiefs, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with y'all with the 14 win ceiling and stuff like that. Again, I do think that the Baltimore Ravens will be better. I could see them going like 10-7 though. I could see like if some of these other teams, like we say with Cleveland, with Pittsburgh, with I've already said the Ravens, but they could steal a couple of the divisional games, and I wouldn't be surprised.
How we beat them last year, the first game.
Yeah, well, I mean, they split.
That was because it was
the division last year.
Steelers stuff, which we know that's weird. You can test.
Well, but entirely like since they split the division last year, so
yeah.
I mean, could they lose 2 to one team? I could see it. It's not even like they lost at Cleveland. They won at home versus Pittsburgh, so it didn't even really seem to matter like where they were playing. So I don't know. I could see it's a very funky team. They also didn't play a full schedule last year, so I doubt that won't happen again this year.
Hopefully.
So hopefully, yes, for the love of God, hopefully. But yeah, no, I mean, it's. I hesitate to say that this could be the first time we see all 4 teams from one division make the playoffs, but that's going to be very difficult because
it
there's
feels possible.
It feels
possible, but it also
AFC,
feels possible for
possible.
other
It
divisions.
feels super unlikely,
too.
but it feels possible.
Well, because I feel like I could say the same thing about the AFC East.
During the
that's the key.
We were getting a lot of seemed like there was multiple years in like the mid 2010s where like 3 teams were making the playoffs in this division with 6 playoff spots. Like, so no, if any division's gonna do it,
well, before
probably the one.
2018, that was the first time that the Dolphins made the playoffs again. The 2007 when they had Pennington or somebody missed it. There was like the 3 teams in the AFC East or 4 teams, and they're like all super good, and like one team missed like at like 11-5 or something like that.
Patriots. Whenever Matt Castle took over for Brady.
Yes, that was that year. Yes.
Even more recently, though, the Jets missed at 10-6 because the Bills beat them in the last game of the season. So they had nothing to play
I
for.
remember that. I remember that. The Ryan Fitzpatrick money year. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That's funny. I'm glad I got to reminisce that.
Yeah, that's a good moment.
One last thing I wanted to say before we get out of here is we've been talking, and I think we all came to the conclusion this is the strongest division in the NFL. Like what you were saying about the 4 teams getting into the playoff. This is the division with the highest win total in the NFL. I heard that on the NFL Athletics show, Robert Mays and Nate Tice, but they were like talking about division strengths. I think the total's at 37.5. They're all projected to win more than 9 games, which is super, super exciting for thinking about what kind of football is going to be played in this division. It's going to be
AFC has the 2 strongest divisions in the entire league.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the AFC East was like a single game behind.
Yep.
Like and we'll it was 36.5, 37.5.
Yes, we'll talk about them last. But that'll do it for us this week. Definitely tune in next week. We're going to move into the NFC West now, right? Because we want to move to the East for the last 2 weeks of the show. So we're going to move into the NFC West. A tale of 2 halves, I would say, in terms of one half of the division, not good. One other half, pretty good.
Yeah, 2 of them compete for Super Bowls. 2 of them compete for Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams, yeah. That's kind of what I think it's going to be. We'll break it down more specifically. But, yeah, going to be a little bit different of a breakdown this week. It's going to be a little bit more top-heavy. But see you guys next week. Definitely try to get you guys a show. I will say now, since I actually know it, for anyone who might either see this or you guys as well, might have to do the show at a different time because I will be in Pittsburgh again for another concert that's happening. So that
actually works. I have a wedding on Saturday.
Okay.
I'm driving back in the morning. So yeah,
so we'll have to figure out something later on that day, but we will figure something out. Make sure we get a show next week, but I'll see you guys.
Peace.
Looking forward to talking about NFC next week.